Thank you to all that are signing in. We'll start in just a few moments. Wanted to also let you know in the chat box, I put a link in there if you want to check that out about Zunesis's ransomware recovery preparedness assessment that we offer. You can look at some details there, and there are also some ransomware resources that you can find at that link. So check that out. We'll be starting in just a few moments. All right, we're going to get started. And if a few people come in later, that's fine. We are recording this and we'll send a link to the recording after the webinar tomorrow. My name is Rachel Siedemann. I'm the marketing manager for Zunesis. We're excited to have you here today to discuss this important topic that is definitely overtaking the news lately. It was reported recently that there are more ransomware attacks in the last year accumulated than there was over the last 15 years. So I'm sure it's a concern for many of you as why you're joining us today. As I mentioned in the chat box, we have a link where you can learn more about our ransomware assessment that Zunesis offers. We have been servicing the Rocky Mountain Southwest area for the last 16 years and have a wide variety of experience. We've also been a platinum partner with Hewlett Packard for the last 16 years as well, and have a platinum level with them. As well, I set up a few polls just to kind of see where your pulse is at right now with what's going on in the world of ransomware. So the first question I'm sending out to all of you is, how concerned are all of you about the possibility of ransomware attack in your organization? Sending this out right now. If you guys can just fill that out quick. All right, it looks like about half are very concerned or somewhat concerned, and a small percentage are a little concerned. Our second question, just to ask quick, have you researched or looked into any additional or new technology to help protect your data in the last year? And that's almost 100% of everyone has been looking into something. Looks like about 75% right now have looked into something in the last year. So that kind of goes with the trends that are out there. So thank you for submitting those. I'd like to welcome James Morrison. He's a distinguished technologist with Hewlett Packard, has a wide experience in cybersecurity. And I will pass it over to you, James, in sharing your knowledge of this very important topic for our customers.
All right, thank you very much, Rachel. So as introduced, my name is James Morrison, and I'm a technologist with HPE. I've been working with HPE about 16 months. Prior to that was a 22-year career with the FBI, focused around cybercrime as well as nation-state threats, and really was kind of at the ground level of seeing this rise of ransomware and this rise of this criminal element that we've seen explode over the last few years. My role here as much as to I'm not going to talk necessarily about the technology that HPE or Zunesis offers, as much as this is awareness and a basic idea for what all businesses can do. The first thing I want to start with, though, is a recognition that I don't care what size business you are. Small and medium businesses are being targeted roughly 70% of the time by crime, by cyber criminals. I was talking to one company last week, and they're like, well, we only make $5 million. And I said, well, that's kind of cute. I said, but when you realize that cybercrime is coming out of countries like Vietnam and India and Pakistan and Nigeria, places where $1,000 can feed a family, you start to get a recognition why you are going to be targeted. You may be low on the totem pole here, but in other countries, you make plenty of money. So you are a target. Please don't ever think you're not. So that's the recognition of the world that we live in. If security was all that mattered, though, right, we just turn computers off. That's not where we are, right? I mean, we have to keep our computers. I've been in IT for 33 years or something like that. I was 8 years military prior to my time in the FBI, worked as an engineer for Lockheed Martin in the middle. And we've seen the internet become part and parcel of all the businesses that we do. We see that there's a massive opportunity through the internet to actually make money. But because of that ability to make money, that also means we're going to be targeted. So the most efficient way we can defend ourselves is things like anticipation, education, detection, reaction, resilience, right? This is more than IT. This is all about what can we do right now to make ourselves less of a target to these criminals. What do we learn in 2020? Everyone's still a target. Cloud is increasingly being targeted. Mobile, it doesn't matter, if you've got people working from home, remote workforces are going to, continue to be targeted. VPNs, if you're using VPN services, we just saw a massive attack against Pulse, which is a big VPN provider. Supply chain, nation states, it's going to continue, and the numbers are only going to continue to increase, sadly, right now. The good news, well, actually, let's not get to the good news. World Economic Forum actually said, ask companies, what do you think is your biggest worry? And of all the tech worries, their biggest worry remains cyber attacks and data fraud. This is a good thing to stay focused on. We have to recognize this and move forward. Last year, the Wall Street Journal did a report, and I can find the dates on it. I didn't find them when I was looking, but 80% of companies view ransomware as the high risk. But what's interesting about that is even though we view it as high risk, almost 2/3 of companies don't even have a cybersecurity program. And we're not testing, smaller companies are not testing phishing. Now, this is important. The world we live in, phishing is something that we should test, and we'll talk about that at the end when we have some fallout. But we have to recognize that phishing is part of why we get hit. 20% of ransomware attacks will come to you through a phishing email, or through an email or a phishing text message or social media connection. So we have to learn how to be trained to recognize those malicious attacks and then report them. So phishing testing needs to be something we look at. Last year, I just got the report from Mandiant. We'll talk about Mandiant. FireEye is one of the largest cybersecurity companies in the world. They just released their annual report. The #1 targeted industry in 2020 was business and professional services. The #2 target was retail and hospitality. #3, healthcare and financial. And then #4 was high tech. #5, construction. I did a presentation to the Construction Finance Managers Association in Houston last year, and they were like, why would somebody come after me? Well, the reason is that you feed into some other company. You are connected into another industry. And the origin of where I see cybercrime is the attack on Target in 2013. And Target was attacked through a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning company called Fazio Mechanical. They hit Fazio, the cyber attackers hit Fazio and then leveraged that connection into the target network to cause the massive amount of damage that they did. So we are all part of an ecosystem, and that means we have to start recognizing how we could get hit because of that. Last year, we saw the first death directly related to ransomware, where a woman was being transported to a German hospital, and that hospital was hit with a cyber attack. And they were unable to take her, and while she was being transported to a second hospital, she died en route. This is the first attributable one. So it's not just hospitals, though. We've seen a large number of attacks against school districts this year. Buffalo got hit. We saw Broward County in Florida get hit, which is a very large school district. We saw a cyber attack against Las Vegas school districts. So every school district is going to be hit by these. And so we have to have an idea. We have to have a conversation before these attacks occur. And hospitals will always be hit. There was some hope last year that some ransomware groups came out and said we won't hit hospitals. That lasted for about 3 months. And then other ransomware groups jumped in and started attacking hospitals. And that's just going to continue the case. What we're also seeing, though, is that when you get hit with ransomware, the amount of money they're asking for is going higher. We saw the University of California, San Francisco hospital get hit, and they paid a $1.16 million ransom to get their data back. We've seen an attack right now against Acer computers in which the ransomeers are saying they're asking for $30 million. So there's a lot of these large financial requests coming out, and they don't care if you don't have it. They're going to keep your data unless you're able to pay. So wherever data flows, security has to follow. Your data is the core of what they're targeting. And so when I talk about cybersecurity, it's that idea of a holistic approach. Data is the currency on the internet. Recognize that even though we're protecting our network, and that's a lot of our focus, we have to become more focused on, first of all, do you even know what data you have that is of importance? I was talking to a very small restaurant here in Texas, and she said, well, I only have 12 employees. I said, well, do you keep their social security numbers in a public place? And she said, yes. I said, then that's the key data they want. They want to steal those social security numbers in order to sell them on the internet at $20 to $30 a piece. So I said, you just don't need to keep it there. Only reason you need that social security number is for tax purposes. So pull that information off. So having a recognition of what data might be targeted helps you, determine part of your security solution. Because really all ransomware is a denial of service. They're denying you the access to your data, knowing that you are likely to pay to get that data back. So how do I protect it? How do I detect it? And how do I recover? Because it's 90% of cybercrime is financially motivated. $10.5 trillion is the estimated global cost of cybercrime by 2025. That is half the GDP of the United States. This is not just a US problem. This is a worldwide problem. And because these criminals are operating out of places that aren't necessarily going to extradite them, we're not going to have a lot of justice either. Cybercrime rule number 2 is the odds of these people going to jail are low, very low. In fact, it's so low that we're actually seeing drug cartels want to get involved in cybercrime because it's less likely for them to get arrested for cybercrime than it is for moving drugs. So we've seen an escalation of attacks coming out of places like Mexico and Colombia and other Central and South American countries. So that's reality. These are a whole bunch of statistics around it. 71% hit small and medium business. Cyber attacks also will look for crises. Rachel and I were talking before we got started about the fires in Colorado and how bad the wildfires were out there. Wildfires draw criminal activity. And companies that are in zip codes that are affected by those kind of disasters are often affected by these attacks. About 2.5 years ago, we had Tropical Storm Imelda come through the Houston area. And we saw massive flooding out in East Texas and Beaumont, Port Arthur and Orange. And we saw almost immediately a 200% increase in ransomware attacks, focusing on zip codes in those 3 cities and the areas around them. They don't care if you're having a crisis. They figure you're more likely to actually click on something because of that crisis. And right now, because of the COVID pandemic, you're 3 times more likely to click on a phishing email that is COVID related. Now, this last statistic is important. backups are going to be hit in an attack. Whatever backups you have, the criminals know that's what your main focus is, and 75% of backups are going to fail when they're needed. So it's important to have a good backup strategy with a good backup solution. Because how much downtime are you going to have? 16 days was the average in the fourth quarter of 2019. That's how long your business is going to be out of order. You're not going to be able to do any of businesses that any activities that are computer based. What's interesting is we had a bunch of municipalities here in Texas get hit. About 14 got hit in late 2019. 3 of them had a great plan in place, and they were immediately able to recover. 3 of those cities actually had no plan in place, and they were down. They couldn't issue tax bills. They couldn't do court order. They couldn't do court. Nobody could go to court for anything. Even their 911 services were off the air. That's how bad it was in those particular areas. So please understand this, that if you get hit, this is going to be 16 days. And this is not necessarily just because you pay the ransom or don't pay the ransom. This is independent of that. This is reloading your computers. This is getting back into your network. This is recovering the data from whatever backups you might have. That's reality. And because we have an expanding attack surface, people are hitting IoT devices. They're hitting your devices on the edge. They're hitting mobile. They're hitting computers, that are being sent home for remote work. And we're going to continue to have to understand that every device we add to our network adds risk. Everything adds an element of risk. So with the recognition of that, that means that's why cybercrime has to get better. What we also saw, and this was part of the Mandiant report, but we've actually seen it over the last year and a half, not only are you going to get it with ransomware, but 60% of ransomware in 2020 also included a data breach. They stole your data. So they know that even if you have a backup, after you recover from a backup, they're going to contact you and say, oh, by the way, we also stole your data. Are you willing to pay to prevent me from actually putting that data out in a public place? What they're also going to do is they've actually created name and shame websites where they'll take your data and they'll publish it out there. We've even seen cases where they will contact your customers, where they will actually send an email to every customer in your customer database, telling them that you've been hit, and attempt to drive your customers away, hoping you'll pay that ransom. These are a number of tactics that are in place, and they will remain that way until we can find better ways to defend ourselves. What's interesting also is statistically, our number of attacks went down last year. But look at this little thing on the far right. 40% of security breaches came from that indirect attack. It came from somebody who feeds into your network. This is the future, where they're going to exploit the customers that affect you, or other companies that have logins to your network. So it's not going to be necessarily always direct. So we have to actually also make sure that the people that connect into our network are following a good cybersecurity hygiene. Because this threat's never going to go away. We have to start mitigating it through better innovation. And that means that when we're buying security products, whatever you're buying it from, whether you're buying it from an HPE or you're going through a partner like Zunesis, you want to make sure that you understand, first of all, what is your true IT transformation? Where are you trying to go? What is your goal? And then how do we make sure that we're actually buying a product that helps you attain that goal? So please don't let any technology person, whether it's me or anyone else, come up to you and say, let's buy a new server. It might not be a server that you need. It might be a different type of product. So we want to make sure we have that good cybersecurity conversation before we ever talk about a product or a technology. That's the world that we live in. So how do we secure this? How do we secure the world we live in? Number one, and this doesn't cost any money, have an incident response plan and test it. Go out to NIST, go out to SANS. A lot of them have incident response frameworks that you can download and you can actually, fill out. They'll do things like ask you questions about what do you have in place? Do you do testing? And then make sure that plan is tested. One of the stories I tell is when I was in the Air Force, I got my first assignment was in the Philippines, and I had been there about a week, and they were doing an exercise. Now, any of you that know the military know that they love those exercises. And one of our people popped out and said, there's a purple smoke bomb on our porch. And I was like, what's a purple smoke bomb? Well, about that time, a guy walked in and said, you're all dead except you. And he pointed at me and he said, they're all dead. You're the only person alive in this building. What do you do? I had no idea. I just got there. And he failed us. He said, in any crisis, everybody needs to know their role. Everybody needs to know the plan and know who to call, even if it's just calling and saying, hey, I'm the last one alive. What do I do? And so that's part of our incident response plan. Know your plan, test your plan, and make sure everybody knows that role. Back up critical information and test your backups. A lot of companies won't test their backups until the day something bad happens. And then the CEO comes down and says, are our backups good? And the IT person says, I think so. That doesn't then put a whole lot of confidence into my CEO when I say I think so, especially when they're considering whether they should pay that ransom or not. So we've got to know that our backups are good. We've got to make sure that they are in an air-gapped location so that should something happen to my local network, I can still recover it. Do an external security evaluation. Have somebody from outside come in and do an evaluation. There's a lot of companies out there that will give you free, low-cost penetration tests. Contact Zunesis. Say, hey, this is something I think that's important. Have it happen. Multi-factor, two-factor authentication. Turn it on every chance you get. Encryption of data. Testing, training your employees, and evaluate who has access and who needs it, and what processes rely on email. Because these are your challenges. When ransomware occurs, if let's say you have a Windows network, when you try to log back into that network, that ransomware operator has actually locked you out from being able to log in again. Every sysadmin I've talked to said that when they try to go back and log in, there are no logins available except for the one owned by the ransomware. So you've got to understand that that's going to be hard to get back in and actually recover. Your domain controllers, your servers may not be accessible. You may not be able to get to them. Do you have a good backup? Can you erase the entire device and reload it? And then again, insufficient backups and restoration processes. So for ransomware specifically, have an effective email filtering solution, regular hardware software patching, up-to-date antivirus or endpoint detection, separate admin privileges, implement an effective application whitelisting program, and backing up your critical files. Email filtering in today's world is a must. A lot of this stuff is going to come through your email. Do you have a email filtering system? Do you have patching? I can't tell you the number of times I've seen companies get hit, and it's because they haven't patched a known vulnerability. An example, Anthem, which is a very large medical group, got hit about a year after a patch was declared for their firewall. They'd never patched the firewall. And that vulnerability was used and exploited by the criminals to launch a data breach against their company. So patching, having an idea, and maybe it comes down to what needs to be patched. Having a list of what, and then prioritizing. Maybe we can't do it all, but we should prioritize patching from the highest incident down. Endpoint security, your mobile devices, whatever devices you allow to connect into your network, you accept a security risk through that. And it doesn't matter whether it's Android or it's Apple. Both of them have similar vulnerabilities. And I can tell you tons of attacks that have come in through those kind of endpoints. And then your sysadmins. I was talking to Rachel. I'm doing a security presentation for sysadmins because sometimes your system administrator doesn't recognize how important their access is in the security of your entire mechanism. So if you offload, if you have somebody who's doing your system administration from outside of your company, you need to make sure that they're following good security practices and that if they're doing remote logins, they're doing it in a secure way. And then whitelisting, application whitelisting, making sure that somebody isn't using an executable in your computer for something that is bad. That's very common. We call it living off the land, and the criminals will use applications that you have on your network to try to do their bad actions. And lastly, your backups are crucial to ransomware avoidance, right? You've got to make sure that you have them protected. The old military rule was 3-2-1, 3 backups, 2 different mediums, 1 stored in an offsite or in an air-gapped network. You got to make sure that you have a backup that should everything break, should your entire building turn into a crater, you have that one backup that's sitting at an offsite that you can get back to being in business. It's crucially important in today's world. because our bad guy is getting better, the adversary is innovating, so our IT is going to continue to transform at a faster rate than we've ever seen. And your business depends on security. Your business depends on having a good security posture and testing that security to make sure that no matter what happens, you're able to recover and get back into business as fast as possible. That's the end of the presentation. I didn't know if you had any questions. I'm here for those if you have any or any concerns.
Great, thanks, James. That was a wealth of information. We'll leave the Q&A open just for a little bit if you have any other questions. Are there any other resources you might recommend to the group today that they might want to look into, research?
Yeah, so one is called the Cyber Readiness Institute. They are a free consortium for small and medium businesses with all sorts of resources for training and other ideas on how to secure your network. And it's specifically focused around the small and medium businesses. In addition, the Internet Crime Complaint Center is a FBI-run group out of West Virginia. They have a number of resources there that are available. And lastly, Homeland Security, DHS.gov. If you want some very specific ways to protect your network, they have a lot of resources there that are free.
Great. First question that came in is, how do you protect backups from ransomware?
So backups, of course, are crucial, right? So that's why the 3-2-1 rule. Number one is, having two different mediums. Maybe you back your data up to a external hard drive, and then you also got a tape drive. But you want to make sure that you, I've seen different ways to do it. One municipality I thought was kind of interesting. They had 2 backup drives, and they would back up their drives for a week, and then remove that drive physically from their network and take it to an offsite. They would take it to another office in another building and plug in a second hard drive. And then that hard drive would process through for a week. And then they would just keep swapping these drives back and forth. So that, now what's kind of interesting about ransomware is, they're only in your network for about 5 days. They typically, the average amount of time that they will launch an attack on your network is about 5 days. So if you have a backup that's a week old, you have a very high likelihood of being able to recover from that backup. So I think that's one of the lower tech ways of doing it. The other idea, and this was, is the idea of having like a month backup, which it's a little older. And what it comes down to, though, is it comes down to how much data can you lose and stay in business, right? So if you're a retailer, usually your loss of data, you don't want to lose customer data, in the last, that you might have acquired over the last week. But you do want to make sure you have, a backup from further back. So it just comes down to sort of the individual business and how you want to do that. There are some technical solutions as well that provide what we call an air gap between the hard drive that backs up, or the physical backup device, and the backup itself. We call them immutable backups. So there are a number of resources that we have in that way with high availability. I kind of laughed back in the military. We were lucky if we had 95, 98% availability, but a lot of these devices now are what we call 5 nines, 7 nines, or even 100%, that they will always be available to you no matter what. So there's some pretty cool technology there if you're looking at it.
Great. Looks like that's all the questions we have right now. So thank you for your time today, James. We'll be sending out a recording of this webinar to all of you tomorrow. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at Zunesis, and we can definitely get you in touch with James as well. If you have additional questions for him or want to look into some of his additional trainings that he can do for your staff, we can help you and get some of that information on that as well. So,
and I put my email address into the chat. So if
great.
You have any questions, you think about something, you chew on it, you sleep on it, you can hit me up with an email, and we'll make sure we get you plugged in with some people that can help you out.
Great. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.